Morning, everybody. Welcome this morning. Good to see some new faces here today at what is effectively our penultimate auction of the year. We've got one auction remaining, 30th of November. We've had 8 auctions this year already. And of those 8 auctions, we've had guest speakers at 6. Guest speakers that talk about various industry trends, contemporary thinking, and lend their voice to ideas and new thoughts. As industry leaders, we take on board this competency and we learn a lot, and we hope that this adds more to the event. It's not just an auction, but more of an experience. Today we're going to be talking about the fuel sector and inviting our guest speaker who has exceptional competency in that space. In South Africa, about 30 billion litres of fuel are consumed by South Africans every year, predominantly because of our reliance on our road network systems for passenger transport and for the movement of freight. But certainly, ever more now apparent, we are starting to burn fuel to keep infrastructure, our commercial and industrial endeavors alive during load shedding. Fuel stations are known to be a very good return on investment for stakeholders that take a position. It's claimed that you will enjoy a return of investment of about 33%, and that you should recover your investment in the first 36 months. It's a very attractive investment proposition. There's about 5,000 fuel stations that are operational in South Africa. About 90% of that is owned by your big majors, your big oil companies, the likes of Total, Sasol, Shell, BP, and Engen. Only about 60 fuel stations a year come onto the market. So it always creates a bit of a buzz. There always seems to be a lot of traction when we bring those fuel stations to market. About 10% of the fuel stations are owned privately, and those that are busy disposing are typically those that are going into a semigration and immigration strategy or even retiring. We have a few fuel stations or fuel assets on market today. Today I'd like to introduce Brent Graham, who has 24 years plus experience in Caltex, Austrian Energy, in property development in the segment, and is now consulting in his private capacity. We've established a great relationship with Brent, and he's consulting to us on our work too. Brent has a number of key highlights in his career, including being project management lead in the rollout of the new Caltex imaging, and he's done a lot of work in restructuring and consolidation of sites. For example, he gives me one where he called it the 5-pack, where it was the retention of 3 Caltex stations and the acquisition of 2 Total stations into a cluster, new on the network. Took 18 months worth of negotiation. You have to be patient, and it's relationship driven. And that 5-pack then generated 1.5 million litres of volume every month. So Brent's got an exceptional background. Today he's going to be talking to us about the fuel segment. He's going to talk about investing into that segment, the various diverse investment models, for example, buy versus build. He's going to talk about diverse operational models and share some insights into trends in the forecourt sector. So Brent, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you today. Brent will give his presentation, and if time allows, we will certainly want to take some questions from the floor. We are compelled to start today at 12 o'clock, our auction. It has been advertised to start at 12, so we will keep an eye on time. If there's no time to do those Q&A, please stay with us afterwards. Brent will be here to the end. He'll take business cards, he'll answer questions. But let's see if we can do some Q&A before the time lapses. Brent, big welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and great to be with you at this beautiful venue, Bryanston Country Club. Greg, thanks for the introduction. And to High Street Auctions, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you about, I'd say, one of my 2 big passions in life. And the other passion, you can tune in at 9 o'clock to Supersport on Saturday night for the Rugby World Cup final, Go the Box. So as Greg mentioned, I've had a lot of experience in the fuel industry. I got into it by accident in 1997 on the fuel development side, joining Caltex. And I've just never got out of it. And I think you can honestly say that I've got fuel running through my blood. If you ask me for directions to a place, I don't talk road names. I say you drive to the Caltex, you turn right until you hit the Sasol and then left, and it's 200 meters on your right-hand side opposite the Total. That's the way I think when I drive past the forecourt. I slow down annoys my wife no end, and I want to look and try and anticipate what sort of volume are they doing. Could the site be better run? I go into C-stores, I'll buy coffee, and I'll just have a look at the offers that are on display there to see what other people are doing in the market. So yes, you'll see today, I'm not planning to paint a totally rosy picture of the market. At the end of the day, we're in tough times. But what I'm hoping this presentation will do is give you a balanced view of the industry at the moment, and I'm particularly focusing this on people who are looking to get into the industry. I think if you've been in the industry for years, I'm probably not going to teach you too much here. You might pick up on one or two things, and you're probably going to tell me afterwards a couple of things that I don't know. But very much focusing on new entrants into the industry. So the first thing I want to have a look at is the industry still a viable investment option? We'll then have a look at service station structures, greenfields. Do you want to start a new site, or do you want to buy an existing site? And then very important things to look out for if you are going to enter this market. And we'll talk a bit about industry trends and challenges as well. Right, let's talk first about macro challenges. This is not unique to the service station industry. I think all businesses are under pressure at the moment. But if we have to zero in on what's impacting the fuel industry, high fuel prices. At the end of the day, high fuel prices mean lower volumes. Now, when I joined the industry, all of my friends thought when the prices went up, the oil company made more money and the retailer made more money. That's not the case, of course, in this regulated industry. Your margins are set, and in actual fact, what happens is people find reasons not to drive. They'll carpool to school. They won't go on that weekend away. So there's no doubt that as prices rise, it does put pressure on volumes, and that in turn tightens the margins or plays its role in tightening margins. This industry does get an increase in margin every year from government, but I think we all know that what government think the inflation rate is and what it really is in our households are two totally different things. And so the increases that are coming are not necessarily enough to sort of offset some of those costs. And let's talk load shedding, for example. If you're running a service station, you've got to have a generator, or you've got to invest in solar. And if you have those type of things like a generator, you've got those ongoing costs that Greg referred to as well. Consumer habits, COVID, no one saw that coming. And at the end of the day, although we've got cars back on the street and most people are getting back, or have been back at their daily lives for some time, people have adapted. People are working from home. They're working hybrid type jobs. I know when I was at my last company, someone actually refused to come to an interview when they found out it was a full-time job. They thought they would be able to work from home. That is just becoming the expectation in a lot of cases. What does that mean? It means people are driving a little bit less, and you have to compete all the harder for that volume. I'm not going to focus too much on the next thing, but we all know that electric vehicles are being spoken about. Personally, I don't think it's a massive factor in this industry for the next few years. And I will also talk about high barriers to entry. You'll see when we discuss greenfield site in particular, it's not an easy. I know guys who've been trying to get into this industry for 10 years and they just can't break into it. And unless you've got a lot of capital, it's not actually an easy industry to break into. We'll have a look at some of the legislation and costs there. Right, let's start off with, I think I've jumped a slide there. So I've gone through some of those macro challenges, but here's the good news. The sector's regulated and it's profitable. Ultimately, consumers have to drive. You can cut down on your mileage, but you can't cut it out totally. If you do, you're still getting something delivered to your place that's using fuel, or you're going to be Ubering to wherever you're going to go. So there's still very much a market there. And I'm very much a glass half full kind of guy. And I see this turning at some point. And when the volumes and the margins improve, of course, you're going to be very well placed to take advantage of that. Most importantly, though, there's still a very high demand to get into the service station industry. There's a few properties and a service station operational site going on auction later. And you'll see when the auction site comes on, if you have to compare it to any of the other sites that come on, there's a bit of a buzz about the room. People still want to get involved. There's still a big demand, and sites are changing hands on a regular basis. As Greg alluded to, some of the older people looking to move out and a younger generation looking to move into the industries. There's also opportunities for you on your site to look at how you can grow that site through additional profit centers. In my opinion, service stations remain a good investment, but on the right terms and conditions. You need to do your homework. And if you think that buying a service station and operating it will be easy money, you need to put that to bed now. I can tell you I've got great relationships with retailers and landlords that I've done deals with over the years. And the successful ones, they all have their finger on the pulse, and they might have multiple sites with managers in, but they know exactly what is happening at all of their sites at every time. Hard work is required. Right, I just want to pause quickly here from that part of the presentation to talk about the RAS margin build-up. This is the regulatory accounting system. This was introduced about a decade ago in South Africa, changed the way fuel was priced, and was really focusing largely on who owns the assets and gets the benefit. At the time, I think it was fair to say that most of the deals were very one-sided towards the oil company. That has changed subsequently with RAS. If we have a look on the right-hand side there, you'll see the total retail margin at the moment is R2.46.90. And what that's broken down into, we've got the retail operating margin and the entrepreneurial margin, which together add up to sort of R1.81. And then we got the investor margin of 65.5, or the capex portion. So that is basically a matrix of all different assets and that go into a service station that bring you up to that 65.5. And what you'll find there is if you own more assets on the site, you should be entitled to more of the margin. It's still negotiable with the oil companies. It's not like you have to stick to that matrix exactly. But if you own the pump and tank, you're going to be getting a bigger margin than the equivalent site where the oil company are owning the pump and tank. As far as the franchise volume goes, if you're a franchisee of a service station, you should be getting the bulk of those top two there, which comes in now at the sort of R1.80 mark. It will vary from oil company to oil company, depending on things like consignment stock and just generally how they structure their deals. So that's just a very high level look at the pricing, which can be quite confusing in this industry. Right, how do you get involved? Well, one way is to buy a franchise. You go negotiate a deal with an existing franchisee. The oil company have to approve you. You normally get a 5-year franchise and you get, as I say, the bulk of that top two blocks in terms of margin. You can make money this way, but you're reliant on the oil company. I think any of you who've tried to buy a business through an oil company will know the red tape and hoops that you have to jump through is considerable. You might put the offer in today and 18 months later, you might still be wondering if you're the successful candidate. Right, what about just being a landlord with head leases? This is a very popular structure over the years. Basically, you own the land and develop the site. The oil company takes a lease over the land, and this is usually in the form of a triple net lease, so it's quite attractive in that as a landlord, you can effectively walk away for the term of the lease. The oil company picks everything up. They invest in the pumps, tanks, and signage, and they will also appoint the retailer. This is often an area which is comes under negotiation. If you've got a really good site, you can usually convince the oil company that you either need to be paid something for their rights to that dealership, or alternatively, that you want to be the retailer yourself through another entity. The return here is based purely on the rental received. The oil company, together with the retailer, is taking the majority of the risk. Now, I just want to, at the bottom here, point out a trend, and this we can probably trace back to COVID as well. Oil companies have become a lot more risk-averse on the type of deals that they're offering. In the past, you'd get a 20-year deal escalating at 8% per annum, no reviews after 10 years or 15 years, and the oil company just had to keep paying. Now, when the volume's there, that's fine, but you can imagine when the volumes dried up during COVID, all of a sudden you had a situation where the oil companies were also burning. So they're much more careful, and you're getting hybrid relationships now where you're getting a base rental with a variable or turnover rental. Alternatively, the oil companies are just building themselves sort of patches along the way, like after 10 years, where they can renegotiate the rentals. Right, then my favorite form is the owner and retailer, the supply agreement, or the RAS agreement, as some people will call it. In this scenario, you own the land and develop the full site. And in some cases, you can get finance from the oil company. You can get grants from the oil company or interest-free loans. It largely depends on the type of site that you got and how attractive that is to the oil company. You enter into that supply agreement, and you should get the majority of that R2.46 margin we spoke about there. The oil company will probably take a few cents for signage and anything else that they think they're putting in. Each of these structures I discussed have pros and cons. It really comes down to how much risk are you prepared to take? How much are you going to invest? And the person or the entity that takes the risk and puts the majority of the investment in usually benefits or should benefit most from the potential profits. Right, I just want to then look at, do you want to start a new site or do you want to do an existing site? So a greenfields or new site, as we call it, they can be very profitable. You're getting the land before it's zoned correctly. You're picking up the land cheaply. But that is only half of the story, because there are major costs and risks involved with doing a new site. Now, what I've put up there is not an exact science by any means. All service stations, at the end of the day, every site is unique on its own. But what I want to show here is that it's actually very difficult to start a new site. You need to, first of all, identify and purchase the land. You've got to get the land rezoned. You need an environmental approval. You can get an exemption if you're prepared to do under 80,000 litres on the site. But if you've got a big site, that might put you under pressure down the line. All of these things take time. All of these things cost money. And then right at the end now, for the last 13 or 14 years, you have to apply for site and retail licenses. So you could go all the way down the line. You could hold the property, you could get it rezoned, you could get the EIA, and you could have your licenses turned down. So for me, that's a very strong barrier to entry for new entrants, particularly individuals. It's something that more property companies or something can hold it, or oil companies themselves. So please, those costs, and that's just an indication, but if you can identify a site tomorrow and deliver it in under 3 years, it's probably the first time that I've seen it in 25 years in the industry. It does take a long time, and the costs will vary according to who's putting in what, but I've put a sort of a range there of about 18 to 30 million. Things like roadworks, for example, you may think the site's on a prime corner. What you may not realize is it's provincial roads, and roadworks are going to cost you 8 to 10 million rand, and that can obviously blow a deal right out of the water. Right, then the third option, and the one that I guess most of us are probably here today for as well, is to purchase an existing site. Yes, you can purchase an existing franchise, we discussed that earlier, but otherwise you can buy a land and business that is up for sale. So high street auctions have had some success in recent months with Celtic's Mitchell's Plain and Clarkstorp sites being sold. And there are 3 sites on today's auction. There's the total site, which is an operational site, so it falls very much into that category. And then you've got a dry site on the N12, Stilfontein. Now, because it's a dry site and it's been dry for some time, you actually have to get licenses, but that is mentioned in the auction pack. And the third one is probably best suited to a bigger developer. You've got zoned land in Atteridgeville, but it's not just service station land. There's development land around it as well. Right, site and retail licenses. I wanted to put a special slide up for this one because site and retail licenses are often misunderstood and they're absolutely crucial to the industry. You cannot operate a service station site without a valid site and retail licenses. When you do a new site, you apply for them together. You can't apply for the site license and say, I'm going to appoint my retailer later. You need to apply for them together. And as mentioned in the previous couple of slides back, you can only apply once zoning and EIA are in place. Once issued, the site must stream in 12 months. Now, you may not think much of that, but think about it now. You get your license, it's valid for 12 months. You've still got to get your SDP, you've still got to get your working drawings, you've got to appoint your contractors, and you've got the 5 to 6 months construction time on site. So my advice to you is if you do go along that route, that you apply for an extension. The moment you see you're not going to hit the 12 months, you go and apply for it. Make sure it's before 9 months are up, and you include your supporting documentation to say, this is why we're not going to meet the 12 months. Because quite frankly, 12 months is impractical. They should change it to 2 years to make it more doable. Site licenses are transferable. So if you buy a site with a site license, the onus is on you to transfer that. The guideline is 6 months. But the retail license requires a change of hands application. And here's where things can get a bit complicated. You buy a site and it comes with the dealership. You take transfer of the property. There's a very good chance that your change of hands application has not yet been approved by the department. We're running out of time. I'll skim through quickly now. And so retail licenses are renewed annually, and we've gone through the other point before, but there certainly can be challenges around that and timing challenges you should be aware of. What you look out for when buying a site, look at the oil company agreements. How long does it have to run, whether it's a lease agreement or supply? It might suit you if it's got long to run. You might want to renew, renegotiate or move to another oil company. Look at the petrol-diesel split. You can have a look at the margins. If there's a lot of diesel, you may want to dig a bit deeper and make sure that that's profitable diesel and that it's not just due to discounting or card marketing from the oil companies. Have a look at what can be done to improve the site. For example, can you add a drive-through or C-store? And then together with that, have a look at the zoning. Can I actually add the improvements I want to? In the past, oil companies thought they could convert workshops to C-stores, only to find out they had zoning issues. Finally, have a good look at the area and study the competitors. I'll just skim through. I'll be 60 more seconds. Industry trends. COVID hit the industry hard. It hasn't fully recovered yet. Some sites have, some haven't, but certainly it is definitely on the uptake. Everyone I talk to now is far more optimistic than they were a year ago. Good opportunities there to build additional profit centers to not only improve your fuel volume, but just to give people another reason to come to your site. Look out for loyalty programs that are playing a significant role these days. And also, as mentioned before, oil companies also a little bit more risk averse than they were. South Africa is heavily reliant on import with only 2 refineries. And also look out for diesel and routers and wholesalers that are selling direct to the public illegally, but unfortunately it isn't being clamped down. Some of you may have seen Carte Blanche cover this a year or 2 ago. I'll bring that to a conclusion then, Greg, and take the pressure off you. But thanks everyone for listening. This industry, in my opinion, provides a lot of opportunity. But don't just think you can rock up, buy a site, and make money. Do your homework. And if you're planning to operate the site, you're going to have to be prepared to put your back into it. Thanks, everyone.